Hey everybody, welcome to Boomer Has It. I'm Jim Jalamas here in Brooklyn, New York.
I'm JB Miller in London.
And I'm going to open up the show today because we're going to hand off some expertise to JB because today's topic is the UK's royal family, casually known as the Royals. Now, here in the US, where we're all former colonials who rebelled against feudalism in general and the monarchy in particular, talking about the Royals might be hard to relate to. Well, you got a good head of hair there, JB.
Well, thank you
Uh,
very much, Jim.
uh, it, for me, talking about the royal family it's like a specialty topic. It's like talking about removing mold from a carpet, or like what's the best exit on the New Jersey Turnpike.
Yes.
So luckily we have an expert on hand who just happens to be the Boomer Has It co-host, our own JB Miller, who not only paid his respects to the late Queen in person, but recently published a novel called Duch. And just to be more specific, that's Duch without the T. So we're not talking about a lowland person from Europe. It's missing the T. Duch was the nickname of Diana Spencer, short for Duchess, who eventually became the Princess of Wales. The book is a mystery, or you might call a speculative novel if you want to be fancy. It imagines what would happen if Diana survived her tragic accident back in 1997 and appeared in contemporary Paris. How would the world react? What would be the impact on the royal family? So, with that background on hand, whether you're a literary watcher, a royal watcher, or a skeptic, like the rest of us here stateside, we're all in good hands with JB, and we think you'll find this one closer to home than you might expect. So I'm going to turn it over to JB, who might have a few words about why the Royals are relevant at this very moment in time in 2026.
Jim, thanks a lot. First of all, thank you for
You're
that
welcome.
very nice introduction. I don't think I'm an expert by any stretch of the imagination on the Royals, but I've been interested in them for a long time. I could almost say for 300 years, because my interest sort of begins in the Georgian period. It's just a really interesting historical period, especially as regards the royal family.
What does
Which
that mean, Georgian?
the Georgian, the King Georges 1 through 4, um,
Jeez,
beginning
it's so confusing. You know, there's a state of Georgia in the U.S. There's a former Soviet republic called Georgia. And now you're
yes,
telling me
well,
there's 4 George kings?
you
Sorry, not to lay it on too thick, but let's just take it slow, if you would,
the
if you wouldn't
state
mind.
of Georgia was named after King George III,
Oh
who
well,
was
whoop-de-doo. Please continue.
who was the king overseeing the American Revolution and who lost the colonies.
Mm,
So I believe the entire 18th century, the entire 1700s, up to 1830 were King George's 1 through 4, and um, I don't want to get lost down this sort of cul-de-sac, but they are relevant to this discussion because there is precedent to scandal in the royal family, and it goes back to the Prince Regent who became King George IV. But I want to start with the sort of the term that a lot of people use to refer to the royal family, and the royal family refers to themselves as the firm. They are the firm. This was brought up, I'm sure, in the series The Crown. I think there's
mm.
reference in that to the firm. So they think of it as a firm, and if you think of it in those terms, it has all of the advantages and drawbacks of a firm, and which includes, you know, public scandal, which can affect the firm's sort of bottom line, to put it sort of crudely.
When
Um,
they say firm, it sounds like a professional practice of some kind. Is that the analogy they're making?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It is. It's a job. It's a business. And the Queen used to have this wonderful phrase: "We have to be seen to be believed," and it's just a great line. And that's why she always went. She went off and shook all those hands. It was in public, so she maintained a connection to to the people, and they could, and that would lend some sort of reality to an extremely abstract concept, which is that this ridiculous family, has so much power, prestige, and money. And what did they do to deserve it? They just got born into the family. I mean, there's really nothing to recommend it. This has been underscored by the Andrew, formerly known as Prince, and his problems,
Ha
because
ha ha.
clearly, he's not fit for purpose, to use another British
Well,
popular.
that's sort of an interesting thing is, you might think of someone being born into wealth and power as being lucky, but it goes two ways, doesn't it? I mean, if you're in the firm, you're in the family, and someone's born into it who's a total deadbeat, that's unlucky because you're stuck with them, aren't you?
Well, yes, absolutely. I mean, I think the general consensus is here um, that the Queen was above reproach, beyond reproach. She was brilliant at her job. She was as modest as someone in that position kind of could be. I don't know quite what I mean by her modesty, but she just did the job, and we
She
didn't.
practiced humility, I would say, right? She was
All right,
always talking about
that's a much
being in
better term.
service, being in
She
service.
she's the royal family are not really allowed constitutionally. They're not allowed to express their political views or vote. Big deal. They can't vote. It's what, I think 20 votes there, but they're for a family that has um, so much respect and influence. I say it's like soft power. It's the power that Trump doesn't understand at all. It's soft political power in the sense that they can kind of nudge nudge an issue in a certain direction or not. An example of this is when during the Brexit debate, before the Brexit vote, which was 10 years ago this year, the royal family were not allowed to express any opinion one way or another. But during the opening of Parliament that year, I think it was in 2016, I think it was the year of the referendum, the Queen unmistakably wore a hat that that matched the colors of the European flag and had sort of stars on it. It was just so clearly a vote of confidence in the European Union, in the EU. Fat good it did, because the referendum went down, went the other way, and it caused Brexit, which we're suffering under. But
She was
anyway,
she was working the system
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
in a way.
But and also I would say I think the biggest risk to the reputation of the royal family at this point is a sense of entitlement. I think that's a very dangerous place for them to be if people think that they feel very entitled. And I don't think
Well,
anyone ever.
entitlement is a hot word here in the U.S., and I think it might help to situate for anyone, for U.S. citizens hearing about the royals, what it really means. I think of them as people who have a lot of wealth and servants, and also there are residues of the feudal system in England. If you buy property, basically you don't own real property. You have a lease from the Duke of Westmoreland. Am I right? Which is very
No,
strange for Americans.
well. Yeah, not.
It's a freehold lease that's 100 years, so same difference. But I
No, it's
mean,
not. Well, it's not completely accurate. It's true that the Duke of Westminster is probably the richest person in England, and still,
Westminster.
yeah, the,
Sorry,
the Duke of
I'm thinking about
Westminster.
Shakespeare.
The, the Duke of Westminster owns a lot of the West End, going back hundreds of years, and so he collects ground rent on I guess most of those properties. But it's not true to say that you
Who
can't.
is he? Does he have a name besides Duke? Does he have a first name?
I don't
Fred?
know.
Fred Westminster?
I think it's Joey, maybe Joey Miles.
I mean, it's. I mean, in a sense, it's not. It's in New York City. The two biggest property holders are Columbia University and Trinity Church. Believe it or not, and they are huge landowners, and they own many leases. I wonder if there's an analogy to be made there.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, I think there probably
is
is a
there?
lot. I would say that the royal family is probably the largest landowner nationally, but the Duke of Westminster just happens to own a lot of very valuable land in the middle of London. But not everyone is paying. You can buy property in Britain. You can own freeholds. It's just that the Duke of Westminster happens to own a lot of a lot of property. Anyway, I know I got sidetracked into the. I didn't know that much about the Duke of Westminster, but this I think the issue of a sense of entitlement is important because the Queen, who died at the age of 96 a few years ago. She was born in 1926. She lived through the Second World War when Buckingham Palace was bombed, and she lived through a certain amount of austerity, if you can imagine such a thing. So I don't think she has the same sense of entitlement that some of her children grew up under, specifically the Andrew formerly known as Prince. We say that because he was Prince Andrew and he had his titles removed, surgically, physically removed from him, and now he's called Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, which was a huge humiliation. I mean, big deal. It's just a name. But he has always had a huge sense of entitlement to the point where he treated his staff extremely poorly. He supposedly yelled at one of the servants for not arranging his teddy bears correctly on his bed. He's not a pleasant person, and no one really has anything good to say for him, except for maybe his two daughters and perhaps his ex-wife. I don't know, but they've all been borrowing money, or no, taking money. They all took money from Jeffrey Epstein, which is
How do they do that? They took money from Epstein?
well, they asked for money and he gave it to them. I mean, they asked for loans not to be repaid. Really, yeah, yeah.
I
There are
see. Oh, they were
emails.
loans. Okay. Uh huh.
They were loans. I'm using
I
quote
see.
marks for listeners. So Andrew Andrew is just a nasty piece of work. And from what I understand, just about everybody else in that family, in the firm, really hate him, partly because he's not a very pleasant person, but also because he's bringing the family into huge disrepute to the point where there's been some worry that he could bring down the royal family, and I'm not even quite sure what that means. But it's a
Well,
fragile
that's
concept.
interesting because to ask what brings down the royal family, you have to ask
What keeps it up?
what
What sustains
sustains
it?
them.
Well, again, it goes back to what the late Queen said. You have to be seen to be believed. It's a bit of stardust. It's a weird concept. Yes, if people stop believing in the concept, then you will have more and more calls for the disband what's the word the discontinuation of the royal family, which has happened in other countries without the use of a guillotine, but it has happened. There's some of the
Well,
modern.
I mean, there's an analogy there. I mean, if there's a Peter Pan analogy, right? If you don't believe Tinkerbell won't survive. But the other one is, we went through a crisis in 2008 in this country where our most important financial institutions were at the risk of collapsing because of an emotion, which is
Yeah,
called trust. And I think it is, if you make that analogy to the royal family, the firm being an important institution in British society, that it's held together by emotions.
yeah,
That's the glue.
that's a good point. I think it's more likely that it could go the way of some of the I think, Scandinavian monarchies. There's a monarchy in Sweden and Norway, and they're sometimes referred to here, I think, as bicycle monarchies. I think that's the term, which means they don't always travel around in fancy cars. They you see them on bicycles. So it's a much more stripped down monarchy. The monarchy here is not particularly stripped down in the sense that they still own the monarch still owns a lot of property and has a lot of vehicles and carriages. Um, my argument would be that's part of their appeal because um, it lends some, that is part of the stardust. But I wouldn't mind seeing all those houses open up to the public. There's no reason why people can't see the inside of Buckingham Palace or, um, Sandringham, which is another big palace of theirs up in Norfolk, or Balmoral in Scotland. Queen Victoria's favorite house on the Isle of Wight is open to the public, and I got into the private garden behind Buckingham Palace. They opened that up a few years ago for a few days or a few weeks, and that it's a park. Their private garden is the size of Green Park. I mean, it's huge. So anyway, so yes,
How big is Green Park?
it's smaller than Central Park, and smaller than Hyde Park, but a lot bigger than Washington Square Park. Maybe it's the size of 6 Washington Square Parks. Probably bigger than that.
That's a pretty big garden.
It's a very big garden. It's a very big garden. It's a big amount of land, right, to have in the middle of London. So I mean, I'd imagine most of our listeners, viewers, know um, what the Andrew case is because the Jeffrey Epstein scandal has been in the news.
Why don't you summarize it for us, at least for me, because it's everything is murky when it comes to that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think one point to be made is that there is some bewilderment and incredulity here in the UK that though Jeffrey Epstein was American, the only people to have met any judicial or police action have been British. Ghislaine Maxwell, his co-conspirator and what do you call it, procurer of young women, is in prison in America, although it's pretty cushy prison because she was moved to what do you call it, a much lighter
Minimum security
security
facility.
by the Bush administration, but only
The Bush administration.
I mean, sorry, the Trump administration. Thank you for the correction. The Trump administration.
Boomer doesn't have it today.
Yeah, I'm having a boomer moment. Only Andrew and Peter Mandelson, who was the UK ambassador to the US, who had very close ties to Jeffrey Epstein, and was cited in a lot of the files, which was a huge scandal here, and came close to bringing down the prime minister. I can say that really with some level of near
Which
certainty.
PM? Which PM?
The Keir Starmer, Sir Keir Starmer, the current prime minister.
Just for clarity, though, right? I mean, it's pretty clear that Andrew had affiliations with Epstein, and maybe was naughty with Epstein. Maybe took advantage of women there. But I think maybe what you're getting at is a case for malfeasance in government. Andrew's role in government, is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's a very long-winded way of getting around to Andrew's case. Andrew was arrested on February 19th, a few weeks ago, by Thames Valley Police on suspicion of misconduct in public office, and that was.
So that's something you can hang your hat on right there.
But to be clear, it was related to allegations that he shared confidential, sensitive trade and policy information with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein while serving as a UK trade envoy. In other words, it had nothing to do with sexual shenanigans. He was accused by Virginia Giuffre of raping her, I believe.
Ouch. That's
Out.
hard for my my tender sensibilities to hear,
I
but
mean, the
please.
way that it's been described online as he sexually assaulted her on 3 occasions in 2001 when she was 17. She sadly committed suicide, a year ago or a couple year ago.
So, and it's so sadly because she'd won a jury award, um, and
Well,
that's
everything about it is sad
yeah,
and tawdry and tawdry.
tragic,
Tawdry is a good
tragic.
word to describe Andrew. He's a tawdry person. And yes, it's all it's tragic. It was a true shock when he was arrested. It was a real surprise. I don't think anyone expected that here. I think everyone expected, and myself included, that he was kind of above the police action. That no one would arrest the brother of the king. And also, it should be remembered he was the queen's favorite child. That was one of the problems. That she never reigned him
My
in.
goodness, she really that
She
was a
liked him.
bad call on her part. Sheesh.
Yes, and she's being criticized for that now. After posthumously, she is being criticized for having a real blind spot with this real piece of work. Um,
There's a Freudian issue in there someplace, but that's not.
well,
That's
I think he
this isn't that
remind,
kind of podcast, is it?
yes, it's Freudian, um, maybe Oedipal, only in the sense that I think he reminded her of her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, who was also a bit of a scallion. That's not right. A bit of a
Scallion is
scallywag.
a vegetable. Rake,
Not
a
a
rake is a garden tool. Let's get out of this
no,
garden business.
a
He was a
rake. He was
twit.
a womanizer. Well, we used to be called a womanizer, but Andrew was worse than that. I don't know about the Duke of Edinburgh, but anyway, I think he reminded the Queen of her husband. Anyway, that aside, Andrew, he was arrested. That was a huge story here. He was questioned by police for something like 12 hours and released. And one lucky, I shouldn't say lucky, he really worked for it. One Reuters photographer got that incredible photograph of him being snuck away in the back seat of, I think, a Range Rover. He was slightly sloped back, trying to um, what's the word, slink down so he couldn't be photographed, but that Reuters photographer got the picture of him with a red eye because of the flash. uh,
Mm.
and it became, if not iconic, I've been accused of using the word iconic too easily, but that photo became a meme, if I can put it that way, and it was the only picture that they got of him either being brought to or released from.
I wonder if there's an analogy we could make. I mean, it is. I see what you're getting at. That it's surprising that they could make charges against him and actually physically arrest him. I mean, what would the analogy be here in the U.S.? I mean, it's to me he's just sort of like this middle-aged, unattractive guy who's a jerk who got arrested. Good riddance in my mind, right? Because I'm one of the colonials here. I can't relate. Um, Throw the rascal out. But
What are you
I
asking?
wonder. I
What's
mean,
the
what
U.S.
would be the equivalent in the U.S. of someone who is seemingly untouchable by the law or through their misdeeds that they could just coast through their lives and
I was
not
going to
be
say a vice president because this is the brother of the king, but I mean those of us old enough, we boomers, remember that Spiro Agnew was forced to step down in a scandal, and that's brought us Gerald Ford, and then of course Nixon was forced to resign. So it's not without precedent in America. Remember this thing in the olden days called accountability in the U.S. Political accountability. Is that a term that anyone remembers? Is that a concept that anybody
Does that
remembers?
have something to do with accounting?
Something to do with
Is that
accounting. Yes, well, it did have to do with accounting. We had accountability, and so we here we're getting. I was going to say we're getting a taste of accountability, but I don't think anyone expects Andrew will actually be um, brought to any kind of justice. I don't. I think it's going to fizzle away. I think the scandal reached its apotheosis in him losing his titles and being forced to leave his uh, big house on the Windsor grounds and move into a two up, two down.
Well, I mean, just to return, there's so much with the Epstein business that is sickening and upsetting. But from purely legalistic terms, if he was serving in an official capacity as a trade representative, trade envoy, as they say, and he was passing along privileged information, what's the accountability from a legal perspective there? Is it a fine? Is it a jail term? Is it
Oh, well, it could
extra
be a fine and
prison term? Is it
yeah.
excommunication? I don't, whatever you guys do in the UK, tell me,
I
please.
think yeah, those are very good questions. I think it could be a jailing offense. The reason people don't think he will serve any time or get convicted of anything is because of the definition of a public figure or the official his official status as UK trade envoy. I think it hangs on just a terminology. I think it's essentially a loophole. I think he'll get off on a loophole. I don't think it matters, frankly. I'm not one who wants to. I don't care if he goes to prison or not. His reputation is already in the mud. No one likes him. No one in his family likes him. Um, um,
Well,
uh,
again, it goes back to the concept of what it means to be royal, and to have an influence on society. It's based on an emotion, and you could say the damage is done. And let's look at the king now. What is the king doing to shore up this perception?
yeah, that well.
Excuse me.
First of all, the king is trying to distance himself as much as he can from his own brother. I don't think there's any love lost between those two. They're very different kind of personalities, um, and Charles uh, recognizes the danger his brother has caused can cause the family. The Prince of Wales, which is to say Prince William, who's next in line to be king when Charles passes away. William will become King William V, and he hates his uncle Andrew from what I understand. There's a great photograph of them, I think, at the Queen's funeral uh, where William is turning away from his uncle as far as he can to not even engage him in any kind of conversation. I don't think he even wants to be seen in a photograph with him. So I think they all sense the danger that Charles does pose to the family. King Charles is I
It's hard for me to relate to this also because I only know the royal family through the lens of watching the streaming series The Crown. So when I hear Charles, I think of Josh O'Connor, and Olivia Colman and all these
yeah,
great British actors.
yeah, that
But
was a
maybe
great.
that's okay. Maybe that's fine.
That's a great. No, I think it's a very good introduction to the royal family. I thought Josh O'Connor was great, except his posture was all wrong. He's always slumped over, and I've never ever seen a photograph of Prince Charles or King Charles slumped over. He is very good posture. That would have been a directorial note I would have for Josh O'Connor. But I thought that series was really well done on the whole. A lot of conjecture. In those scripts, but it was not a bad introduction to the royal family.
And I want to make a point too, a personal point. Again, this is just my limited knowledge, but that King Charles is a lot more interesting than his reputation. And my first introduction was that when I was working at Bank of America during the pandemic, we brought in international speakers to sort of raise our spirits. And one of them was the king. And our
Really? Wow.
CEO, Brian Moynihan, our CEO, our king of B of A, spoke to your king, referred to him as your highness.
Well,
He had a really,
he would have been Prince of Wales then. He wasn't was he wouldn't have been.
oh, you're right. Sorry.
He was
Take that
Prince
back.
Charles,
Still
but it
was Your
would have
Highness,
been
though.
His Royal
Kind of weird
Highness.
to hear your. It's kind of weird to hear your CEO call someone Your Highness, but he did, and he was, his issue is the environment. He was really
Of,
engaged. He was
of
really
long
engaged with.
standing.
He was really engaged with. He yeah kept hearing say, "Well, Brian, the point I'm trying to make is," and he was emotionally invested in the
Yes.
conversation. And I realized, like, this is a guy who has intelligence and convictions.
Well, he was ahead of the curve on the environment and organic farming. He was way ahead of the curve on that. He was ridiculed slightly in the years past over his, supposedly talking to trees or plants. Or he was really at one with nature, and I think it spoke very well of him. Even at the time, I thought it spoke well of him. But he's been vindicated by a long shot, as Al Gore has. Remember, Al Gore was talking about climate change 25 years ago when few people were. You know, this is an aside, but if Al Gore had become president in 2001, the environment globally would be in much better shape. He would have, I think, set a lot of precedents. And
Well, talk about speculative fiction. Maybe your next book should be called Gore.
Gore, yes, maybe. So yes, I think Charles is respected, and remember when he and Princess Diana divorced now 30 years ago, she came out of that divorce with much higher ratings, you might say, than he did. He cheated on her before she cheated on him. He was always involved with the woman who later became his second wife and now is Camilla, Queen Camilla. And they're both respected more than they were 30 years ago. They were, Charles was a figure of some ridicule and dislike. And I think he's been vindicated. I don't think Princess Diana's reputation has taken that much of a knock, but certainly his reputation has gotten better. And the Prince of Wales is quite well liked. Prince William, bizarrely, is sort of seen as a younger generation, as a generational figure, although he's now in his 40s. So, these people come to the monarchy pretty late, as pretty old. Charles is, in his mid 70s. So he's waited his entire life to become king. These are old people. So the question is the Andrew, formerly known as the Prince, is he going to bring down the royal family? And my feeling is that he probably won't, and that there is interesting historical precedents for this. Two figures I'll just quickly mention, and one is the Prince Regent back in the late 18th and early 19th.
Okay. Stop. What's a regent? What's a prince? How do they go together? Isn't that redundant? A prince and a regent?
No, he's the only Prince Regent we've had, really. He was the Prince Regent because you remember that King George III went mad. And there was a wonderful film and play about this by Alan Bennett, The Madness of King George. King George III, who was the king of England during the American Revolution, he had, I think, something called porphyria, and it affected him easily. So he stayed the king, but his oldest son, Prince George, became the Prince Regent, meaning he was really in charge. He was for all, except in all but name, he was the king. His father was still alive and technically king, but Prince George became the Prince Regent. The Prince Regent. That's and you may have heard of something called the Regent.
That means sort of like de facto, the de facto
king. And if you visit London, you'll be aware of places like Regent's Park and Regent Street. And you've heard of the Regency and Regency period architecture, and that's all from him. Not that he was the architect, but he appointed people like John Nash, who designed a lot of those things. He was to some degree.
I'd like to be a regent. That would be cool to have on a business card.
He was so.
Jim Jalamis, regent. Please continue.
Yeah, so he's an interesting figure because he was mired in scandal. He was mired in financial and sexual scandal. He had lots of affairs. He had many children illegitimately with his mistress, so none of them could become king, or none of them could, you know, be in line for the throne. That became a
This is the
problem
18th
later.
century.
This is the early late 18th, early 19th century. He finally became king in 1820 when his father died, and then became King George IV for 10 years. My point, and will you please get to your point, Mr. Miller? Yes, I will get to my point. My point is that even though he was mired in political and financial scandal, he was an aesthete. He was an intellectual and artistic patron. And so his reputation has survived as a patron of the arts,
Hmm.
which
Was he a good king? To quote Beowulf, was he good king?
was he good king? No, I don't think he was good king. Methinks he was bad. Methinks he was bad king. He was
He
he
was
was
bad king.
he was narcissistic king. He built this enormous folly of a palace called Brighton Pavilion, which is beautiful. It's down in Brighton on the south coast, a kind of
I've
neo-Indian.
been there. I went to a
You have.
kebab house late at night there.
It's
Please.
a beautiful, unique, bonkers structure, but he knew good. He had good architectural taste, and the Regency architecture of the period is very elegant with white Portland stone. There's a lot of Regency architecture in London and all over the country. So he survives as a patron of the arts and as a sort of artistic figure in a way that none of the subsequent monarchs have. Oh no, with one exception, and that is the Prince of Wales in the 19th century, who became King Edward VII. And he's apropos to mention him because he was also a patron of the arts. He knew people like Oscar Wilde and Bernard Shaw. He went to the theater. He enjoyed the company of women, and he enjoyed art and all these things. And he was also mired in personal scandal that brought the family into some ill repute when he was cited. He was brought to court as a witness in a cheating scandal in a card game, and I think he was also cited in a divorce case. So you can imagine what a scandal that was in the 1800s and the Victorian era. And then he
And he
became
was he was actually hauled in to police
he was what
inspectors. Hauled in,
called
questioned,
in.
hauled in,
He
brought
was
into custody, detained.
yes. He no, he wasn't detained. He wasn't forcibly. No, he was like a witness. I don't think he was arrested or anything, but he was
Oh, oh,
he was in he was no he was a witness in a
card game.
yeah in a yeah because money was involved there in a gambling card gambling game. And when he was king, he was known as the peacekeeper. The war, first war broke out 4 years after he died, and a lot of people think the Kaiser never would have launched a war while his uncle was still alive, King Edward VII. So,
Oh,
you,
right, and it's worth mentioning that most of the most of the royals in Europe were related to each other.
yeah, very much so. They were
Just
cousins.
because you were
They
the
were all
the
cousins.
Kaiser or the king of Germany doesn't mean you're German necessarily.
No, that was when Queen Victoria married all of her children off into the royal families all across Europe. So the Kaiser was effectively King George V's cousin. They're also not only were cousins to also the Tsar, the last Tsar of Russia, Nicholas II, but George V and Tsar Nicholas II looked like brothers. They looked very similar. Anyway, so
Well, I
the
guess
two
blood. I guess blood is not thicker than water, considering how warlike Europe has been in the 20th century. Is
well
that
by
fair
the
to say?
second certainly through the First World War. The Second World War,
Squabbling.
well, the Second World War, there wasn't really between related families
No, it
because,
was a more modern war, modern nations. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I mean, I guess with these historical references, I'm kind of making the case that our scandal-laden, plagued figures from the royal family in the past were also intellectual and artistic figures, something Andrew has nothing to offer. The current royal family are really not readers. They're not into the theater. They're not into art. They're probably the patrons of all the museums, but they're not really engaged in the I don't in those kind of
Well, it's also
intellect.
interesting because I think of feudalism. I think of royals as um, builders, and you mentioned Brighton Pavilion,
Mm.
and but then we go back in time, and I think of castles and drawbridges and big public works that protected people or helped advance the society through great feats of engineering. But has this family, this modern version of the family, do they build? Do they do anything except act in a diplomatic way or try to
Yeah, no,
influence policy?
that's a really good question. I mean, I think you might have to go back to Queen Victoria's husband, Albert, um, who was German and came over and married her, and that was a great love affair, and they had lots of kids. He was a true intellectual, and he was a true patron of the sciences, and he was behind the Great Exhibition of 1851, which begat a lot of national, like Geographical Society. He was a real patron of the
The
sciences and
National Geographic Society came out of that.
no,
Nat Geo?
royal.
Really?
That's the Royal Geographical Society. The Royal. It's a very various science organizations. The Science Museum, what became the V&A Museum. He died quite young, but he was behind a lot of great works, um, in a way that I can't think of any subsequent royal figure has been. The Queen Victoria had nothing to do with Basilgate, who was over the engineer who oversaw all of the great sewers, the resewering of London, which needed to happen in the 1880s, 1870s. The royal family, nothing to do with the tube system, the transportation system. Um, I think, so they're not. Yeah, that's a great question.
It would
How?
be interesting to compare wealth, modern wealth attributed to the royals today to wealth attributed to royals in the 18th, 17th, 16th centuries. How much economic power did they actually wield? It's sort of an interesting question.
In the old days, or in the new, or what is that your question? I would.
I'm like royal dollars compared to constant dollars.
Oh, I don't know.
How does
I
their wealth
don't know.
compare to what
I don't know.
those families had in the
All
feudal era?
I can tell you that the Prince Regent was always in debt. He always lived far beyond his
No,
means, and managed to somehow get out of it. He ended up in Buckingham. They bought Buckingham House and rebuilt it as Buckingham Palace. He seemed to live very well for someone who was always going bankrupt. I don't think there's been a monarch since then that's had that kind of financial issues. Although we come back to Andrew, who has hit up oligarchs for money, and his finances are extremely mysterious, and he's lived probably beyond his own means. But I can't answer um, those financial questions really.
does it
They
date
live
back to does it date back to the Magna Carta? I mean, is that what destroyed their wealth or diminished their wealth, I should say?
I don't know. Their wealth's pretty good. I don't think they're hurting for wealth. Um, they get.
You know what? It's relative, though. I mean, we have oligarchs in the U.S. They're the wealthiest people in the world. The sums of their money are staggering, and
Oh, they're
in
much wealthier than.
historical. But when we're talking about the feudal era, it's a little bit hard to measure because it was all based on land, pretty much property. I wonder how it compares.
I think a lot of the royal family's perceived wealth is abstract because the monarch can't really sell any of the properties. It's not like they could sell, Sandringham or maybe they could. They don't need all those houses,
Could they
but
make condos out of Buckingham Palace?
I mean, they,
That would be a hot condo.
it, it's it's those. I would kind of argue those palaces are held in trust, if not for the people of Britain, then certainly for the family. That's why what Trump has been doing to the White House bugs me so much because it's not his house. It's his house to tear down, change the columns, tear down the East Wing. I don't care all the gold crap he puts on the walls. That could be taken down. But once you are removing pillars and tearing down part of that, it's not his house. You know, it's just ludicrous. So anyway, these. Yeah, just as the royal family survives on this abstract notion of their importance, I think their wealth is abstract as well to some degree. They own a lot of land and they take a lot of rents and they take a lot of public funds because taxpayers pay for their upkeep, even though they make a lot of money off.
Oh, that's very convenient.
It is. They've
Mother
got
of
a pretty
God.
good.
It's just
They've got
hard
pretty
to
good.
relate to. I guess I'm an American boy after all. Sheesh.
They've got a good gig, and that's why I mean, to bring in another royal, Prince Harry. He's always complaining about everything. That they aren't paying the public. The public funds aren't paying for his security detail when he visits the UK, and so he gets in danger. And I'm thinking,
It's a big bill.
Jesus, man, you got like what $20 million for your book. You got a huge Netflix deal. You've got a lot of money. You've got a lot more money than you would have had if you'd stayed, in the UK. Shaking hands with people. He can pay for his own security detail. Anyway, he's always moaning and complaining. His reputation is diminished, not as much as Andrew's has, but he and Meghan. And I was originally hugely supportive of them, and I was very upset when people were criticizing Meghan all the time. But now I'm a bit fed up with both of them, to be honest. They kept on complaining about wanting to be, left alone, and they want their privacy and everything. And like, what, they make all these all these Netflix specials and invite cameras into their kitchens and publish tell-all books and then have interviews about the books. It's like, it doesn't sound like you're not guarding your own privacy much, particularly.
No.
Don't get me started.
Old-fashioned cashing in.
Yeah.
Well,
So
how should we conclude this topic of the royals? Are we talking about? We're back to Andrew again. Unfortunately, is he going to be is he the
I
bad seed that creates destroys the monarchy?
yeah,
Is
I
that
don't think
what we're
so.
looking at here?
I think you can almost make the argument that he makes the royal family more sort of interesting because everyone's talking about him. Maybe, isn't there that phrase, there's no such thing as bad publicity? If that is the case, then he is a positive influence on the royal family that people are at least paying attention. People aren't getting bored to death by the royal family. If anything, it's all catnip. His scandal is catnip to the press and to people's interest. So I'm not saying he's saving the royal family, but he's certainly keeping it interesting. And maybe that's the note we should leave on, because
It's what I think of right away is I think you actually wrote a screenplay called First Brother once. I mean, could he
well
be like
remembered. Well
a
remembered.
Roger? Because is he a Roger Clinton or God? Let's not go back
Yes,
too far in
my,
the past.
my
Could he
contention.
be a Billy Carter?
Yeah, very well remembered. There was a point where every president had a rotten brother, had a brother that brought his family into disrepute. Um, even George W. Bush, and you think he must have been the rotten brother himself. But there was another brother. Which Bush was it who was caught in financial scandal? And of course, with Trump, it's himself. Trump broke the mold because he's a whole family's worth of scandal in one person, really. Although there's a lot of scandals. His father wasn't a very particularly nice figure. But yeah, that's a very good comparison. Yes, he's like Andrew is like a rotten first, is like the no good first brother. Yeah, absolutely. Although I don't think any of those first brothers were involved in sexual scandal. I think they were mostly financial scandal.
I
I
don't
think
think they were in financial scandals. They were just sort of regular guys who were,
no,
scallywags and went about their
they
business, and
financial. I
it
think
didn't reflect well on the office of the presidency. And they, by the way, they didn't really bring down the president, although Carter was a one-term president. So maybe we can attribute some of that to
I
Billy.
think Billy Carter brought down Jimmy Carter. I think you could argue that Kennedy was Edward Kennedy helped bring down Jimmy Carter because he challenged him. The same party challenged him. Do you remember that in 1980? He had a major primary challenge to the sitting president of his own party.
I do, and
Anyway,
lost, and
that's
he lost it for everyone, didn't he?
yeah.
He lost it for Ted Kennedy, lost it for himself, and he lost it for Jimmy
But
Carter as
there
president.
was the Iranian hostage scandals. We're back to Iran, the embassy scandal that really burned up the Carter administration. And then there
and
was
the
that
and
rescue
the failed rescue attempt
rescue
too.
mission. I mean, it was a parade of, of of disasters, which was too bad. And then he became the best ex-president ever and won the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes,
Jimmy
well
Carter.
done.
And lived to be 100. Good for him. So, do you have any head quakes for us, Jim, this week?
I have so many head quakes. These conversations are so stimulating. I have multiple head quakes.
You're gonna
When
have
you
a headache.
but One I'm just going to touch on quickly, and then I'll get to the other head quake. Is that when you mentioned 100, I saw an obituary yesterday for Calvin Tomkins, who died at
Yeah.
100, and
Did he die?
he,
I didn't know he died.
he
I thought
died
he was
died
writing
day
in the New
before
Yorker
yesterday.
about being an old geezer, and I was a big fan of his. He wrote this beautiful book about Robert Rauschenberg, which was terrific.
A great reporter of the art of artists, of visual
Yeah,
artists,
yeah, he
with
was
of
great.
by someone who had no background or education in fine art. And
And they were very
but
readable.
so whether you've been reading him for decades or not,
Mm.
and we overlapped with him personally, that's a whole other story. But
Ooh,
he
I
wrote
want to hear that.
the most charming piece in the New Yorker about turning 100. And
Mm,
it's one of these things where the body is failing,
mm.
but the mind is as crisp and as alert as a man in his 20s, or you know
Wow, I've
at
got
his
both my
peak.
body and mind going, but
uh,
anyway, that's an aside. Good for Calvin.
well, so I guess maybe it is ironic that as he was turning 100, that he'd write this really charming masterpiece full of terrific anecdotes. One of my favorite anecdote from the piece, so you don't have to read all 3,000 words, is how he was visiting. Who's the famous Southwestern painter, female
What,
painter,
Georgia O'Keeffe.
Georgia O'Keeffe. He was in her kitchen with her assistant. She was making chicken. They were having a chat. She was stooped over the oven, and there was an explosion. And she got up, and her eyelids were swollen.
Oh my
And she
God.
said, "Well, the chicken's off."
As well arrived. Did she live to be 100 or close to that? She lived to be a good old long. And Alfred Stieglitz, her paramour, they lived to be really up there.
Yeah. My other
Um,
head quake, if I can split the time, is just that I have my eye on a new film based on a book by Peter Weir, a hot book, and called, oh God, what's it called? Talk
Hail
about body
Mary.
and mind.
Hail Mary. It's
Hail
not.
Mary, thank
Well,
you.
it can't be Peter Weir. That's a film director. Is his name Peter Weir?
He wrote the book called The Martian. That
Yeah,
was his
which was
first
made into
book.
film with Matt Damon.
Matt Damon, great film. I can't account for the book, but I have to say it probably has something to do with this new book. I've read a little bit of it, and it's it the reader's not going to be carried away by lyrical passages, but it's really well crafted. The opening scene is a man who's awakening from a long slumber or coma, and as he arrives at consciousness, he understands, and the reader understands that he has really unusual skills understanding physical science, mathematics, space, and as he makes his observations, um, you understand that he's in space,
Yeah,
just through his observations. So
I just
that's and but the other great thing is, I mentioned to you earlier, is uh, it's an early it was the film was just released, and it's breaking records not only in the United States but globally, which is some good news that Hollywood could use right
yes,
now.
we cheer that on theatrical releases. We cheer on. Yes.
Yes,
Um,
go Hail Mary.
can I
Your
make a
turn.
correction? His name is Andy Weir, not Peter Weir. Peter Weir is an
Sorry.
Australian film director. Andy Weir. The novel is called Hail Mary, as is the film. And I'm dying
Thank
to
you
see
for
the
keeping me honest, bro.
You're welcome. I want to opportunistically put in another word for that novel that you very nicely referred to. It's called Duch. It's by me. You viewers at home, this is what the cover looks like. But I have another. My head quake is a different book, and it's called Pre-Code Essentials for early classic film nerds like me, and it lists 50 films of the pre-code era. The pre-code era is 1930 to 1934.
Could you just describe what pre-code means?
Pre-code, the production code was to try to rein in the lasciviousness depicted in film, which included sexual shenanigans, people not married having sex or affairs, drug taking, same-sex affairs, all the interesting fun stuff in movies. The production code actually was established in 1930, but wasn't hell wasn't enforced until 1934. So when people say pre-code films, they mean the films, early sound films before 1934, which had all this really exciting, juicy stuff that you did not see after that period for decades. After 1934, films got much more restrictive. And when they re-released films in the 30s from earlier in the decade, they cut out a lot of fun scenes. So this book lists 50 films of the pre-code era. It's called Pre-Code Essentials. I've already probably seen about 20 of them. A lot of those pre-code films are available for free on YouTube. So it's fun to check them out.
What do you see that's different? I
In
mean,
those,
isn't every black and white grainy film, aren't they all the same?
to some people's eyes, they are. They're wonderful, really wonderful, really fun films, and I'm sure you're a fan of some of the very fast repartee. If you think of God, those actors could speak fast. Humphrey Bogart, James Cagney, they could speak a mile a minute. And you could understand everything they were saying. They were fast talkers. Um, Even a film like Casablanca, just watch it for the speed of the dialogue. There's a great movies. And also at this point, where we are in 2026, I think pretty much every silent film is public domain now. So you can find everything on YouTube from the silent era, or at least online, if not on YouTube. You can find
When I
all.
think about think about creating a code to instill trust in the public. It's the industry playing defense, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Warding off criticism. And in I think the late 1960s or 70s, the comic book industry had to create a seal of approval. They had to create a voluntary code to
Yes, because
protect
they,
young minds
they didn't
from.
want government intervention. That's why they did it. They rather would have their own code, an industry code, rather than the federal government step in. And I imagine, was that the same true with the comic books? Was the comic book industry? It wasn't the government. Although
It was self-regulation, like, and I
self-regulation,
well, there are several industries. I think the brokerage industry used to have a self-regulating body
because you
that
don't
would.
want you'd rather not have the government involved.
Right,
That you've no
same
control of.
difference.
Yeah, yeah. We made that. What about the albums? There were records that, and this was Al Gore's wife, then wife. What was her name? Tipper Gore.
Tipper Gore,
Tipper
right?
Gore got all upset
Yes.
about rap lyrics and hip hop and rock lyrics, and she got all steamed up about that. And she had these stickers. I don't think anything was censored, but she had these round stickers stuck on album covers to probably just help their sales. But I remember her appearing in Congress. This would have been the 1990s at some point, I think, the mid 90s. It
That's
seemed
right. And
so,
testifying. All right, I'm going to quiz you. Who
yeah,
testified on behalf of the
really?
recording industry?
Oh, God. Oh, really? Yeah, it
Who?
seemed
Who? Can you name that person
who testified in,
on behalf of the recording industry? Name
no,
that. Name
who
that
was,
musician. It was Frank
yeah,
Zappa.
Frank Zappa. Frank Zappa. Yes, Frank Zappa.
He was in Congress testifying
Good for
against Tipper Gore.
Yeah, I think she won that battle and lost the war, if I could put it that way, right? She got her stickers stuck on those albums. That I don't think anything was censored, and just like you know, some of those early or right through the 30s, there was the Catholic League of Decency banned. They didn't ban films. They told their congregations that they couldn't see these films. They were kind of banned by the Catholic League of Decency, and I bet there were a lot of people who rushed to those very movies that got the seal of approval of disapproval from the Catholic League of Decency.
Well, I like to think back to the our early theme that we're Americans and some of us can't relate to the royals. We're Americans and we do value free speech. Does free speech thrive in 2026? Who's to
Yes, and
say?
not here. There's no First Amendment in the UK. There are certain phrases that have been, I think, "Free Palestine" or something. There's something you get in trouble if you shout out at in these demonstrations. The Palestine Action Group has been banned. I mean, there's some under a Labour government, I might add. This is a whole other subject, but just to remind people, there's no First Amendment in the UK, and the U.S. citizens should treasure their First Amendment and guard it because not very many other countries have that freedom. I don't know if any other countries do, to be honest.
Yeah. Well,
Stated,
we could go down that road for another podcast. I think
yeah.
I'm going to transition now to the mailbag.
Mailbag. We
Uh,
need a sound effect for the mailbag, but I don't know what that would be.
we need,
We
we need
invite
a
mailbag
bag.
writers to give us ideas for a mailbag sound effect. I don't know what a bag
This comment comes from someone called Old Snohomish. The word
is. That a real
"old"
person?
with an e at the end. Uh, and he asks the question: have we lost everything in common? And I think when he says that, he's talking about media. And we go back to the time when there were three networks on television and PBS, and on any given week, you might end up at the office or with family to talk about an episode of Seinfeld or Friends, and that the
Water cooler moment.
fragmentation today, right? So you have a water cooler moment. Although maybe for some people we have to explain, especially remote workers, what a water cooler is and a
All
water
right,
cooler
what's the
moment.
water cooler? I think that's a great. I think that's a great subject. I was actually thinking about that as for a future episode. Um, yes, how different the news delivery system has been, and how much we've lost having a commonality when it came to current events and the news. That's a great subject. That
It's a
really
great
is.
subject, and kudos to Old Snohomish. Anyone who is a Pittsburgher will remember that Old Snohomish was a a novelty brand from the Pittsburgh Brewing Company.
Is that right?
They
I
claimed
didn't know
that
that.
they claimed that the foam was at the bottom of the beer,
Really? Was that true?
and
Can they?
they released novelty cans with Miss Snohomish, and
Maybe if you open the
uh,
can upside down, you'll get the fuzz.
they printed the labels upside down.
Oh, I love it. It's a great promotional item.
But I think in the end, it just tasted like Iron City beer. So
That was
if
Mad
anyone,
Men working. That was Madison Avenue advertising copywriters working at on all cylinders for that one. It's great, great idea. Oh, I love it.
well,
Okay.
that brings us to the end. We hope that you listeners now feel a little bit more global, a little more secular, a little bit more worldly.
Oh,
And
yeah.
until next time, this has been Boomer Has It.
Boomer has. Thanks. Bye bye.